just wanted to welcome you all and introduce myself. So this topic today is going to cover peer pressure, which is something that lots of people feel incredibly impacted by. From a personal standpoint, I just want to share with you, I have been a teacher for 16 years and I've recently transitioned out of my role in the classroom to come and work for Smart Families because I have had many experiences where I have had conversations with parents, with students, with staff members at my schools where I've worked, who we've just recognised that there's been a shift in some of the developmental areas we recognise in our children. From a personal other kind of perspective, I'm also a mum. I have 3 children. I have an 8th grader, Alex, my son. I have a 6th grader, Jude, another son, and then I have Beatrice, my 9-year-old, who's in 3rd grade. So not only am I walking through this professionally, I'm also walking through this very personally. And so a lot of the research that we do around kind of these topics is very much based from a very heartfelt place for me. I not only read about it and speak to parents about it, but I also live it with my own children. And so many of the things we're going to talk about on this webinar today about peer pressure are really things that I walk through day to day with my own children. So I meet you all with a lot of empathy and a lot of compassion. Parenting in today's world, especially with tech, it's hard, and it can be really hard for people to kind of find a firm foundation for themselves and their families. So I'm just going to start the webinar. I want to just very briefly talk a little bit about peer pressure before I invite Melanie into the conversation. When we invited Melanie, which we feel so honoured that she's joining us for both this morning and this evening's webinar, I just wanted to make a little statement to just share with parents to be mindful that, we all have a duty of care. Melanie is 16. Anything that we want to discuss, we're asking that we put it into the chat part. We have moderators here at Smart Families who are going to be looking through the chat. If you hear anything that Melanie says that resonates with you, you want to share maybe some feedback, please just put it in the chat with us first. And then at the end of the call, we can invite people to kind of share. The same with questions. Melanie and I have had some incredible conversation around kind of her experiences of peer pressure, because we recognize that as adults, sometimes we can project what we think it feels like for teenagers based on where, how we experienced peer pressure when we were kids, but things are very different now. And so Melanie just brings that very unique perspective. So you may have questions, you may hear Melanie share something. Also, we just invite you to put the questions in the chat. They're going to be, we've got 2 members, we've got Hilary and Dean, who are members on the team here. They're going to be looking through the questions, and then hopefully we can pose those to Melanie. But we have had some great discussion ourselves. We've done some questions and Melanie's kind of got some answers together. But like I say, if you hear anything that particularly resonates, you want to know more about, maybe you've got a teen and you've heard Melanie share something about her experience that you just want to, shed some light on, please feel free to use and utilize our chat. Many of you who know me know that I love talking, and so I could talk for hours on this subject, but I would love this to be interactive. I know lots of you have got your cameras off and muted. We do not mind distractions. We know people may be home with young children, people might be driving in the car. If you just feel really convicted to share, please put your camera on, unmute yourself and just engage with us. We learn best when we learn from you. You are all walking in this too. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and just show you a couple of slides just about peer pressure and really just frame what it is that we're talking about. And some of you may have already seen our newsletter, which we sent out a couple of weeks ago. That has a lot of this content in. We're going to then speak to Melanie and then we're going to go back. So I'm going to share. Yeah. Okay, so I believe you can all see my screen, and I'm going to open this up. Oh. Okay, so This is our navigating peer pressure that we are walking through for those newcomers. I know some people have just joined kind of last minute. So, oh, I'm going to hopefully try and move this. Oh, goodness. You might just have to see that in the bottom. Okay. So, we're going to look a little bit at peer pressure. We're going to look a little bit about the science behind social conformity. Specifically, we want to talk a little bit about teens and conformity and what that looks like. And then after Melanie has shared, I want to just revisit and I want to talk to you about parent-child attachment. And then for the evening, we're going to put Melanie towards the end, but I've kind of shuffled around my schedule for this morning. So she's going to feature in the morning in the middle section of the webinar. Okay, so peer pressure. When we think about peer pressure, we often think about the negative side of peer pressure. And actually, when we stop to really reflect on what peer pressure is, we can see that there are many, many instances of positive peer pressure. Another way we like to think about this here is about social conformity. So there are very positive and negative aspects of that too. So positive peer pressure, when someone's peers influence them to do something positive that helps them grow as a person. So examples of this is a peer with a commitment to doing well academically. You know, if you have a child maybe as an athlete and they're an athletics team and they're around peers who are of a similar approach to their sport that they're doing, that's an instance of positive peer pressure. So being around those kind of peers will make your child or the child in the family want to be and kind of assimilate to those kind of features. So this encouragement can extend to being positive social emotional influence and promote kindness, loyalty and support for others. A really great example of positive peer pressure that I've heard recently was there was a study recently done about students who stepped out in very pro-social environments. And so, for example, they wanted to go and help out at a food bank. So it was a group of high school students and they were looking to see if somebody was doing something positive like going to a food bank, whether other teenagers would want to do the same thing. And actually that research study showed that it had a great impact. So there was a group of students and they all decided that they were going to go work at a food bank. That's a brilliant example of positive peer pressure. Then the one that we hear most about is negative peer pressure. So this is when someone who's a friend or part of a group that they belong to makes them feel that they have to do something to be accepted. So this can be in person or online. And I just want to pause here a second because we had a really great conversation with somebody recently who works for Sephora, who was telling us about how peer pressure isn't always necessarily within like a school-based setting or maybe a friendship group at home. But what they've noticed and have recognized at Sephora now is that they have all of these young girls who are going online onto social media platforms and who are being bombarded with, stories, reels, kind of the negative peer pressure to conform around skincare products. And so she shared with us that actually what they had seen is an increase in young girls who were going into Sephora, who were going and asking for advice and help on buying products containing high levels of retinol because they have been seeing online that they need to be using skincare products for anti-aging at 10 and 11 years old. And these girls are going in, and she had first-hand experiences of girls who were coming in with chemical burns on their faces because they had seen something online, they'd been and purchased these retinol products and had burned their faces. And in one case, there was a child who'd actually got permanent pigmentation damage. She permanently damaged her skin from using these products. So there's an example of kind of negative peer pressure. You got negative things that go on in the world that people want to try and conform to. Other examples are things like skipping class, engaging in the latest TikTok trend. If anyone has seen the news recently, you may have seen the new TikTok trend is called TikTok Knock. And it's where teenagers are going up to houses in the middle of the night or early evening and like kicking the door, knocking around. I guess it was like knock a door run or ding dong ditch. But nowadays, we live in kind of a fearful society and teens are doing this and getting themselves in trouble and, instilling a lot of fear in communities. So there's kind of a TikTok trend that some children are being drawn into doing. So when I talk about conformity, there's actually some really interesting research and science around conformity and what it is that goes on inside an adolescent brain that makes them more compelled to do or engage in behaviors that maybe they wouldn't do if they were by themselves. Now, just to address this somewhat, we know friends are important, like peers are important, and especially when a child starts going into adolescence, their friends and their friendship groups, take on this whole new meaning. This is a place where, whereas children had often gone to their parents to ask advice and maybe guidance, then there's a very natural and neurological shift that happens in a teenage brain where they start to individualize and they want to find out more, and they put a lot more emphasis on what's going on in their friendship groups. And so there's the science behind this. So here I'm just going to read through a little statement. So that they've looked at brains and conformity, and they know that when other people agree with us, our brains show relatively heightened activity in areas related to reward. Now, on previous trainings we've talked about adolescent brains and how they are far more susceptible to dopamine. Dopamine is the naturally occurring chemical in the brain that is to do with kind of pleasure and a lot to do with motivation. And so adolescent brains are already more sensitive to dopamine. And then when you add in conformity, so these areas that heightened even more related to reward. So the results showed that social conformity is hardwired in the structure of the brain. And so when we feel like we are going against what other people are asking us to do, and it can be very covert or very overt, kind of very subtle peer pressure, that when an adolescent brain and also an adult brain, but for the purpose of this webinar, we're talking about adolescent brains, that when they feel like they're not conforming, then the part of the brain that signals kind of like a punishment is activated. And so what that then does is those feelings of, rejection get intensified, and children don't like to feel that they are going against what everybody else is doing. Their brains are signaling that they're doing something, that's against the pack. And it's not just humans. There are lots of other living species that also demonstrate this behavior trait. And so they feel more compelled. So again, this is why, especially at this age, we see this happening. Again, this is just kind of an overview. I always put lots on the slides that we do because we actually make the slides available to you after the webinar. So I kind of just synthesize a lot of what's on the screen, but these will all be available to you too. So adolescents, individuals are in the process of mastering the intricacies of the social world. And so this is a really integral part of maturation and growing up. Researchers spend a lot of time studying this. There are lots and lots of books about, what ways we can kind of overcome peer pressure. And I'm going to just show you this is a graph, and then I'm going to pause here, and then I'm going to loop back to Melanie so that we can involve her in our conversation. So I just wanted to show you, this is an example of one of the studies that scientists and researchers look at. And so they studied to see, what is it that happens? Why is it, and what evidence do we have that this is a real thing? So, if you're in this webinar today and you have young adolescent children and you are recognizing this shift, like, please know you are not alone. This is something that people and researchers anticipate is going to happen. This was a study that was done in the UK, and they were asking questions to a large sample of adolescents, in fact, all different age groups you can see here: children, young adolescents, mid, young, and adults. And they were asking questions for them to assess the risk of a situation. And then what they did was they then told the child, actually, this is what somebody else thinks about that situation. And then they asked them to give another statement of how risky they thought it was. Now, what is interesting from this graph in front of you is you can see the younger adolescent, which is ages 12 to 14. You can see that it's the only age that when a child was told what their peers thought, so not what an adult thought, what their peers thought, they changed their answer and they went with the majority of what their age group, their peers said. And this is what happens. And this is why when we come back to the webinar content after we've spoken to Melanie, I want to talk to you about ways that we can not necessarily eradicate this trend. Like, this is a very natural trend. And you'll see that by mid-adolescence, the shift changes again back to, you know, adult influence and kind of conforming to what adults think about, especially around risk, and not necessarily what their peers think. But there are really practical things that we can do that really help that. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to welcome Melanie to our conversation. Can you just, Hillary, can I just confirm, have I stopped sharing my screen? Can we all see everybody else's? Melanie's
yes,
lovely
you're
face.
good. You're good, Sally.
Perfect.
Okay,
That's what I
and
wanted
Melanie,
to
you're unmuted.
know. Wonderful.
Yeah. Great.
So we met Melanie because Melanie has an amazing story to share, and we've had lots of conversations with her. So I want to just welcome you, Melanie. Thank you for joining us.
Hey guys.
Would you maybe start by just giving us a little bit of an introduction about who you are, and then share, you know, a brief summary of your testimony and why it was that we, you know, found you and just wanted to invite you here today.
Yeah, so hi everyone, my name's Melanie. I am a sophomore. I go to a private Christian high school, but I'm very passionate about finding a solution to like just all of these issues that we're facing today. And so last year I gave a speech about like the dangers of smartphones and to my freshman class. And since then, my interest in this topic has only grown. So a little bit about me. I first got a phone in 7th grade, but I didn't download social media until 8th grade. And when I was in 8th grade, I had TikTok, Instagram, and Snapchat. So triple whammy there. And I had immediately become engrossed in this like new world. And I spent hours and hours a day scrolling because it was just so much new information at once. I was like, how will this ever end? Like, you know, because it's just too much to learn at one time. And so sometime that year, I watched Netflix's documentary. It's called The Social Dilemma. And it like really opened my eyes to truly how addicted I was. So I was like, okay, I'm going to delete everything. Like so I got so excited and I deleted everything. And once I got past that initial period, it was like a week or so of just like boredom. I felt very like freed, and I had this sense of like mental clarity. And so this was great. It left time for reading more, getting into more sports. But this like honeymoon period was kind of short lived because after 6 months, like the new trends started circling in, right? And I was falling behind because all the old trends were leaving. And so I convinced myself that I would re-download Snapchat and only use it as a means to talk to my friends, because for whatever reason, a lot of teens only like to communicate on Snapchat. I don't know why, but I think it's partly because chats delete and they feel more powerful to say what they want. But so I re-downloaded Snapchat, and then before I knew it, everything else was re-downloaded because I was like, well, if I have Snapchat, what's the point of not having Instagram? And then Instagram, then TikTok. And so I had fallen back into this trap. And this was only magnified when I was thrown into a new school freshman year with no friends, and my workload, because I was in these honors classes, was like tripled. And so it was just not a great time. And so one night, after a particularly really bad night of scrolling, I decided enough was enough, and I deleted everything again. And since then, I have been clean of social media for almost 1.5 years. So because of my experience, I'm going to be talking mostly on issues that adolescents may face, but I definitely think it can be helpful to parents of all ages.
Awesome. Thank you, Melanie. And I think, you know, even just that short opening state from Melanie, you can see that, you know, the push-pull that children feel for social media, you know, and being able, you know, to have it and then remove it, but then knowing you can download it again. So, I mean, it's a real struggle that teenagers feel. So can you share any times that you experienced negative instances of peer pressure?
Yeah, I think most peer pressure, like you were saying, comes from the pressure to get these like social media apps, because from these apps is where you get all the other peer pressure. So that initial push of getting any form of social media, I feel like, is the strongest for those that don't have it. There's so much pressure to get apps like Snapchat where you can text friends without your chat saving. And like as harsh as it sounds, texting an iMessage for kids is kind of considered like social suicide almost. And so while using these apps with your friends is so fun and you get to like bond over memes you see online, like that really only consists of like 10% of the time. And that 90% is when you're alone in your bedroom scrolling. And so, it's important to recognize that while it's fun in the moment with your friends, when you go home and you're alone by yourself, it's not designed to be used by yourself, I don't think.
Okay, thanks, Melanie. So you've talked a little bit about social media, and I just want to kind of explore a little bit more, based on some conversations that we've had. So could you share any ways that social media has negatively influenced you or your friends' thoughts and opinions on any topics, any, views of things?
Yeah, I think a lot of people envision peer pressure as like, a group of kids standing around this one person saying, do this. But I don't know, maybe it was like that back in the day, but it's not now. Really, a lot of negative influence comes from like teens' lives. Like negative influence in teens' lives is just simply from their own head. But that information that they're thinking comes from social media. So what I've seen is like with social media allowing people to share their opinions like on anything they want. I could go on social media and say that I hate the color purple. And that's just something you didn't really get to tell the world your thoughts on the color purple before. And so with people being able to share their opinion to like anyone they want now, teens are getting so much like conflicting information, like, oh, she likes the color purple, but she doesn't. And then this, and then your brain is just this constant, battle between what to think. And so, for example, right now there's a trend where people will just go on and say top 10 things they hate while they like do their makeup or something. And so I remember one time I watched this video and this girl was saying like, oh, I hate when people raise their hand in class because they're trying to act all smart. And like from then on, I would like refuse to raise my hand in class, even if I knew the answer, because it's just like it was just this crippling anxiety from like, oh, the constant fear of being a weird or annoying kid. And so that was definitely just not knowing what to think when there's so much opinions being thrown out there. And then another issue I see a lot today is consumerism. So you're talking about the Sephora thing. These apps are built to make money for the brands that endorse them. Like it's free for a reason because brands are pushing ads to people. And so by pushing content to children, telling them that they need to buy a product to be accepted is a perfect way for these brands to make money. So this could be seen in like recent trends like the Stanley Cup craze or Prime energy drinks, all that stuff, or Drunk Elephant, like you were saying. So these trends are especially skewed, I think, towards girls because they target body image issues and then they sell a product that promises to fix these insecurities. So I literally had a note on my phone. I probably still have it. When I had it, I had a note of all the stuff I wanted to buy. And I was like, I'm going to save it for it's my birthday. I'll tell my mom. And it was all this like all the trends that went through. Like, I want this new blush or I want this new water bottle and all this stuff. And I had a list of just all the stuff when I was on social media of what I wanted to buy because it's just so compelling to want to buy things.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things we do at Smart Families is we have a program called the App Trap, where we go into schools and we actually speak to the children directly about how a lot of these apps are very intentionally engineered to, for that kind of messaging, exactly like you're saying, Melanie. And so it's very easy for children to immediately get, start kind of deriving their value from the products that they use, like the consumerism, like you said. I mean, it's exactly that. And if anybody is familiar with, there's a news story currently going where Meta is, there's a big lawsuit. Lots and lots of attorneys have got a lawsuit against Meta. And it's mainly around they were selling the data of children onto other organizations. And so what actually is happening is that these apps know the kind of algorithms to build. So when they have a young girl that at 13, which is crazy that's the age that a child, the world views it as when they're mentally able to, withstand a lot of these pressures on a social media platform. But actually, it's got a lot to do with the data part, that they build algorithms that will automatically push beauty products at young girls. Like that is the algorithm is set that already at 13 years old and younger if a child has, changed their age. So they they will do that. And Melanie is just a perfect example with that testimony and that answer to show you that these children absorb and internalize, this kind of very persuasive technology. So, are there any ways that you have seen risky behavior encouraged online that could actively promote peer pressure?
Yeah, definitely. There's people can so casually like post these risky behaviors without any consequences. I don't know if it's because like the platforms can't track down where they are, but when kids post like videos of them doing illegal things like vaping, drinking, etc., they never get in trouble. And so this encourages them, number one, to post, but number one, it also makes other children seeing these posts so exposed to it. So like this definitely becomes an issue when like a child is offered something like a vape or something, and it doesn't seem like a problem because they've seen it on their page multiple times and it's not stigmatized. There's nothing wrong with it really. So even if they know it's bad for you, they see so many people doing it, and you naturally will assume if a lot of people are doing it, it can't be that bad. So
well, and so I have a personal story to share on that because I have my own children, and a few years ago, there wasn't a lot of awareness around how, we all believe that what children were seeing on things like YouTube Kids, was very innocent, and we know very differently now. Like we know that there's a lot of stuff embedded which is very inappropriate for children. And so my children, and again, our position here at Smart Families, we are not here to criticize, shame. We have walked through these challenges with our own children too. And so my middle son once declared to me that he couldn't wait to vape. And I was like, excuse me? And I mean, I had no idea. And it's because he'd been seeing content that was, marketing or like vapes as this like cute, fun thing to do, all the different flavors. And it is that easy for our children to just fall into that. And so obviously we then had a big conversation about it, but these are the things that have really make me passionate about sharing stories like this with other parents, because there's a lot of shame around if your child, maybe engages with a certain behavior that they don't know is as risky as what the adults do, because we don't often have these kind of conversations because it's a blind spot. We don't know that they are seeing these things. So thanks, Melanie. What about so we have a lot of parents on the call today. I know from my teaching days that I would have lots of conversations with parents who felt very helpless to, oh gosh, I've lost my child. I don't know how to get them back. And so can you share with me, how has your involvement with your parents helped you kind of counter that social media trap?
Yeah, so like the trap that I'm referring to is like, so if you're, for example, if your child has social media, it's more than likely that you've seen them like zombies, just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and they won't stop until you like practically drag them off the phone. And so like this creates feelings of guilt for them because they know they're doing something wrong, but to drown these feelings of guilt, they'll probably scroll even more. And so oftentimes this like loop of scrolling can only be broken by like a family member walking in. So for instance, sometimes I would just be like, oh, I need to start my homework. And then I would be scrolling for like hours and hours. And the only thing that could stop me is my dad walking in and saying, do you want to go get ice cream? Or do you want to do this? And then I'd be like, okay, good. And then I'm off, and then I'm ready to start what I needed to do. And so I think it's really important, even if your kids are like, go away, mom, don't come in my room, check in on them, even if they seem like they don't want you to, they don't want you to be involved in their life. Just check in, because sometimes you're the only one that can like get them out of this social media loop. And so for younger children, replacing screen time with stimulating activities like playing outside can also be really great, because it reminds children of like what real fun feels like, as opposed to sitting and staring at an iPad. So
yeah, well, that's great. Thank you, Melanie. And I think, a lot of parents can probably hear what you've just shared, and even recognize in themselves that they have also had moments where they have been scrolling aimlessly for, a long time, and then they find themselves trapped. So I love what you said about, even if the child kind of rejects you and shouts at you, like, it's impactful for them to still, kind of help be that sever that link that a child's brain is compulsively using the tech. Okay, so we've just got a couple more questions. Can you share any instances of positive peer influence that you've either been engaged with or you've ever seen before? So can you share with us that too?
Yeah, I think the main one that I've trying to be a part of is influencing my friends to get off of social media. I think if we can make it the new social norm that we're limiting our smartphone usage, like I really hope one day when we go out in public, it'll be almost shameful to go on your phone. And it's just disrespectful. Right now, we're still in that period where it's just normal for everyone. But I think we're going to see that same shift that maybe we saw in smoking, where everyone's like, oh, you don't smoke now. Maybe now we're going to see that with smartphone usage. But I think it obviously starts with one person. So, for instance, after giving that speech about social media, like 3 of my classmates deleted social media. And I'm not sure if they kept it off, but once they delete social media, maybe they'll influence another friend. And so we just need to keep the cycle going. Because once again, kids are very influenced. So if their friends are doing something, they will too.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you, Melanie. So we had a question in the chat. I was going to say the question that's directed to me, I'll come back to that shortly when we finish with Melanie. But Melissa, your question is kind of probably linked a little bit to our final question. So Melanie, can you just kind of conclude and share with us all, Melissa in the chat was asking, within the year and a half you've been off social media, how are you interacting with your friends now? And have they also removed themselves from social media? So I'm just interested in the part about interacting with your friends. So how does it feel to be a teenager in today's world and know that you are someone who is not conforming to the social media trap and the pressures around that kind of platform?
Yeah, totally. Resisting this pressure to download social media is like certainly an ongoing battle for many. And I think that's the main reason people don't delete it, is because they think they've escaped it, and then their friend brings something up and then they're like, oh man, I'm missing out again. And so I urge you not to give in, because staying off of social media gives you so much more time you can be spent doing other things. So sometimes I just have to remind myself, like, really, yes, it's fun to scroll, but really what I've been wanting to do is read this new book, or really what I've been wanting to do is go to the gym. And so that's my internal desire, but then it's like masked by this desire to scroll on social media. So if you can remind yourself that this is not really what you want to do, this is just something that you have no control over, then maybe you can bring yourself back to what you're trying to do in life and save yourself so much time. And so then, also if you're deleting social media, I recommend you tell your friends, because if your friends don't know you're going off and you're trying to go about this battle silently and be like, I'm just going to delete it, it's no big deal, I don't have to tell anyone, they're probably going to continue talking about things, and it's going to influence you to re-download it. And so when I told my friends, I'm really trying to stay off social media this time, like, can we talk about something else? They were very understanding. And for the few friends that were like, would make fun of me, like, Melanie, you're such a grandma, why are you doing that? They're great, but I did distance them from myself a little bit because they weren't supporting where I was headed. And so I think it's really important you tell your friends what your goals are, because most of them, if you have good friends, they will support you in what you do.
Amazing. And then tell everybody, how many books did you read in 2023?
52.
So you can see, and I hope people listening to Melanie, and I was so impacted from when I met Melanie, we had our conversation, because you can hear so many parallels to our adult lives, like, oh, I just want to read this book, or I want to do that, I want to go to the gym. Like, these are all statements that as adults we have with ourselves, or we say with our friends. So you can see just how important it is for us to be showing up for our kids and kind of addressing these things that Melanie's talking about, and also modeling it as well. So Melanie, that's amazing. I think I've covered all the questions. Melanie has to go to school now, so we just want to say a huge thank you to Melanie, for taking the time. For us here at Smart Family, she was just this amazing, person who has just resisted so many of the things that children are bombarded with in their lives, especially as they enter into, having social media. So I think I can't see any other questions. Just to address the question before I go into the next, I'm going to be very, very quick with the last part of my presentation. So about webinars addressing potential risks of social media around teenagers. So currently we have a program that's if your child is at one of our Smart Family schools, we have this app trap, and we've devised it. It's all the research about how these tech companies use the neuroscience that they know about children's brains to create these apps. So there are even, instances where, especially, often with boys, they start with kind of in a gaming dynamic, and then girls more of the social media side. But they use neuroscience information and they sell that to app developers and they teach them. So we have a whole app trap program that's in schools. However, we would love, to also share this in a webinar content. So that's definitely something we can do in the future if parents are interested. Again, what is always so interesting when we talk about the children and how it affects the teenagers and the adolescents, but you'll see there's a lot of parallel in how we are also very hooked and looped into the apps that we use. So I hope that answers your question. So
Melanie, before you go, if you don't mind, Sally, just want to make it very clear, because this always comes up. Obviously, we're here to promote delaying getting a phone in general, right? But you're helping everybody sort of see this flip side, and of course, past the age of 13, what life is looking like for someone today. And we hear so much about Snapchat being the only form of communication between peers. And so have you resorted more to text messaging, and is that considered like the dinosaur of communication? But I'm assuming you still have your core friends who do utilize it.
Yeah, I think a lot of texting on Snapchat is almost like meaningless. Like, I don't know if you guys have heard, but streaks, where basically all you do is send a picture of the ceiling or something, and it keeps this like streak up of how many times you've texted back and forth. And so like some of my friends have had streaks for like 500 plus days, where all they do is just and it's like a responsibility. If they go up, like we had a retreat up to the mountains for and there was no service, and they had their other friends staying home log into their Snapchat and send these streaks, because if you lose them, you can't get them back. And so it's a lot of the communication is kind of meaningless. So I feel like I really like looking back, and I wasn't missing out on that much. It would just be these meaningless conversations of like, oh, what streak do you have, or like what are they posting on their story. And so when I really want to talk to someone and have a real conversation, you don't need to send a picture of you to talk to someone. You can just text it on your phone, or you can talk to them in person. So I think like it's like the conversations they're missing out on don't really mean anything. It's usually for the purpose of keeping a streak for someone. So
well, thank you for that insight.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Thank you so very much for coming. I know you're going to be late for school, but for a very, very impactful and important, talk. And I hope you feel proud of yourself for the amazing decisions you made in life. And I know it's showing in your fantastic reports in school and everything else you do. So keep it up. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you.
Bye.
So I'm sure you can all see why we invited Melanie on the call, because a lot of the fears that, we have as parents, especially as you're going into the, social media age, that, it's real. And a lot of these things, like she mentioned about the streaks, we may as adults look and think how utterly absurd that a child could, go to the extremes of getting a friend to log in on on their device so they don't lose their streak. But I mean, it's real. And a lot of, mental health things are tied to this anxiety that a lot of these apps, almost plant in the children. So I know I've only got 5 minutes. I want to just talk a little bit, because, you might hear that and think, oh my goodness, now what? Like, what do I do? How do I get my family and my child, who may be like, you may be a family whose child is struggling with social media, or you may be someone who, their child is asking, can they have social media? And so I want to just share a little bit of information before we kind of wrap this up about ways that we can address this. Following the call, I'm going to send all the participants to this call, and we've got an information sheet that's going to be sent out to you. It's going to have some practical tips how we can counter peer pressure based on what I'm about to share, and also some links to the videos. So there's a great video about a boy who has really kind of shines light on what the Snapchat streak is like. So we will send all this information out to you. So I'm just going to share my screen quickly again, and I'm going to bring up this here. Okay, so what I just want to talk and kind of end this in is, you know, peer pressure is very much rooted in something. And so we've had some really great conversations here, and I do a lot of research, you know, researching a lot of like child psychologists and neuroscientists about what it is. And if you think of peer pressure as like an onion, we can kind of peel it back. And what I believe is really going on here is an attachment issue, or an attachment dynamic. So when children are born into this world, this is kind of the standard that we see of needs of children. So at the very bottom of this pyramid, you can see a child's need is for secure attachment. And then the child learns about individualization. And then after this kind of mastery, they go on to socialization. Now, what we hear a lot of instances, especially kind of in this modern world now, is that we see that socialization and individualization have been flipped in this pyramid. So a child is born with an innate need to attach securely to a caregiver. And so that is, you know, this very innate thing. They need certain things like, you know, food, care, love, to be able to thrive. And then what happens then is the child uses that secure attachment to create kind of almost like a blueprint of what they want to be like in the world. And so during this individualization kind of phase that a child goes through, they will look a lot at, you know, what are they learning from their parents? Like, what is important to their parents? They make that important for themselves. And then eventually they go out into the world and they socialize. You know, that's where they start to engage with peers. So by flipping those two top parts of the pyramid around, what that looks like is, in today's world, what we tend to do now as parents is, you know, we set our kids up on having play dates very early on. And so, you know, we have put this emphasis on children's friends, like having friends is a really important thing, maybe too soon, where children haven't been able to really figure out who they are and what their place is in the world before we socialize them very early. And especially kind of today, children go out into the world a lot earlier. You know, lots of the just cultural demographics have changed. So, you know, often we have two working parents now, not in every situation, but lots of situations, you know, one parent isn't as likely to stay home anymore. And so children are kind of thrust into the world earlier than they have been in the past. And so what that can be is children may start to be influenced by friends just at an earlier age. So the next. So what can happen is a child can only have one primary attachment. They cannot have two competing attachments. So there's either parents are going to be their attachment, or their peers are going to be the attachment. And the way that the children internalize who their primary attachment is who shows up for them the most. Now, this can be a very convicting, especially, you know, as parents. You know, we are also very impacted by technology. We are so hyper-connected and so accessible to everybody that sometimes, you know, we come in from a work day, and, you know, we are tired and maybe we just need to zone out ourselves. Parents might pick up. I stand here with my hand up because I'm also somebody who's done this in the past, but until you recognize it in yourself, then you can change it. And so what will happen is children will naturally gravitate and attach to the people who show up for them the most. Now, if it's their friendship group, if it's their peers, that is where they're going to attach. And so you might see this demographic, you know, this situation where your child comes in from school, they spend 8 hours a day with these kids who they've been at school all day with. They come home, you say, how's your day been? Yeah. You know, what did you learn at school today? Yeah. You know, what have you done? Can you tell me something? No. And you'll kind of hit that brick wall about how to engage with your child. And then they may go upstairs, get on the computer, get on their iPad, and then start talking to the people they've spent all day with. And so you come and say, hey, you know, you've been talking to these people all the time. Like, you've seen them all day. I haven't seen you all day. Like, I want to know how your day is. And they will look at you like you are, like, have lost your mind, because for them, their primary attachment is on their peers, and that's who they want to spend time with, and that's who they get their influence from. And so we really advocate for parents being the primary attachment for their children. Now, what does that look like? We believe we don't talk about values anymore, and we don't spend, as much quality time together. And so what you're wanting to share with your child is that I have something to offer you that nobody else can. So, and that's showing up. And that's kind of like the next point. So at 1.5 years old, and if you've been through this stage, you may have a toddler who has told you no, and you try and ask them to do something and they say no. And that's individualization. Like, that is a part of individualization, when that child recognizes that they aren't, a part of you and they are their own separate entity, and they'll say no. Now, what happens during adolescent brain development, we all know kind of when this all starts, the restructuring or use it, the children go through another phase of individualization, and they will tell you no. It just looks far more sophisticated than your 2-year-old saying the words no. For them, saying no is things like, they reject you, they don't want to engage in conversation with you. And it's really important as parents that we don't internalize that, and we don't think, oh gosh, they don't like me, because we're not there to be liked. We're the parents. There are sometimes we have to set the boundaries that their peers aren't going to set. So you have to just keep showing up. These kids are going to go through a lot in their lifetimes. They're going to experience rejection, maybe through, job applications, relationships, friendships. Things are always going to end. And you just have to make sure you're not the thing that ever ends for them. You're always consistently showing up. And then the final one, which I think maybe is just hidden by this little box that I can't move, is just about talking about discussing family values. Now, I'm putting like a lot of information into a very, very short space of time here. If you are one of our Smart Family schools, we are offering something at your schools called a family workshop, a family code workshop, because we believe that, without children having a framework on what their value system is in their family, that when they are faced with things like peer pressure, negative peer pressure, maybe engaging in risky behavior, if they don't have that value framework, which is their kind of blueprint and is the thing that anchors them to the decision making that they do make, then it's really hard for them to know if they're going to stay on the path or they're going to fall off, and diverge and go with what their peers want them to do. So we are offering this workshop. It is a free workshop. It's going to be at your school. This is for Smart Family schools. We've invited Dr. Collier or myself or Dean are going to be doing these workshops where we're going to talk about values, like what are our values. I challenge most adults, if you ask somebody to explain what a value is, they would kind of find it hard to say what that is. But that's what we want to talk about, that very openly. We're going to provide dinner. It's going to be a very, very wholesome experience where you will get to talk very openly with your child. So I have done this workshop with my family, and during this kind of conversation we were having at a workshop, my then, I guess he was 12, said to me, yeah, well, I don't want to engage in self-harm, because he was talking about what our values are and how he doesn't want to engage in something. Well, I had no idea my kid knew what self-harm was. I mean, that was something that had come from an outside influence into, his kind of thinking and his brain. And that was this amazing place that we were able to talk about that, and we were able to discuss what that is like. Where have you heard this before? And this is the power of very intentionally spending time as a primary attachment, showing up and having these conversations with your children, so that when they are faced with something that, you've already talked about, maybe you've taught them how to say no already, and you've given them those refusal skills, that when and there's research behind this that I can share when we kind of email out the information to you. When a child who has had these conversations, who has a parent that shows up and has a parent who's their primary attachment, those children, when faced with, the chances or the decision making to do something negatively, will actually reflect back on what they've been told and think, oh, is this something I would do? Is this something I should engage in? Is this something I should say? And they have that. And Melanie's a beautiful example of this. Those kids are empowered to say no. Like, when they have a friend who's saying, oh, Melanie, you're such a grandma, she's like, okay, that's fine. They don't internalize it in the same way, because you've given them that really firm foundation. So this is very quick. And then finally, something I'm going to send out to you is, these are just some other strategies. I know I'm very conscious of time and I don't want to go over too much, but these are some of the things that are going to be in the handout that you can are going to have. Again, you know, we are always available. I can put my email on the handout. If you ever want to just kind of talk with us and say, hey, this is what we're going through, you know, we'd love to be able to share what, you know, we find and source and share that with you. But these are just some of the ways that you can help combat peer pressure and just be that good social influence for your child, listening, you know, being involved, teaching those refusal skills, celebrating them, celebrating their successes, you know, helping them build self-esteem so that they're not seeking to find out their self-value and their self-worth from the things that they are told or the things that they see on social media or the videos that they watch. They know through conversations with you, like, about themselves, and just open communication, always having that. Now, this might feel something that's way beyond your reach. This may be something that you think, I'm going to start this. You know, what we do at Smart Families is we build a community of people, like-minded families who really want to, you know, change the culture together. And so you're never on your own. If, you know, if you're there thinking, gosh, my child is, you know, I don't know how to even start these things, I can guarantee you there are other people either on this call or on this evening's call who will feel exactly like you. And we want to just put you together. Now, if you're not a Smart Family school currently, you know, we hope to be in your school at some point. You know, we are rapidly expanding. But if you are not a Smart Family school, and so this workshop isn't currently available to you, the next newsletter that's going to come out is all about values. And in that, there's going to be a downloadable template that you can use to have even just around the dinner table, a conversation about values. I just really challenge people to have that conversation. It's very enlightening. You know, it's such an interesting, you know, the feedback you'll get, and, you know, a little goes a long way. And even just having that interest sends a very, very strong message. Okay. So I was conscious I was trying to make up for the time that we missed at the beginning of the call. So thank you for listening.
That was amazing. That was fantastic.
Yes.
No, you nailed it. I know you had to go fast, and that's not normally like something anyone desires to do with so much information to cover. But what I want to quickly do is, before anybody heads out, if you could just put in the comment box what school you actually do attend or your children attend. We would love to see where we are seeing participation with the schools enrolled in our program, if you're comfortable in doing so. That way we can also reach out to the schools who maybe are not getting the information. So we really appreciate that. And thank you all for joining. Okay, Sally, do your wrap up. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh,
but
one
before
second,
anybody
one
lined
second,
up,
too.
I wanted to get.
Oh, go on. Go ahead, Dean.
Yes. So really quickly before we close up, I also want to every school, Sally kind of alluded to this too, that we try to build up that community. And I know there's some parent leaders already in the chat and stuff like that. So if you don't know who's your parent leader, who's involved, I'm going to put my email on this. If you're not sure who it is, go ahead and email me. I'd love to connect you with your parent leaders, ways that you can get involved at your community, at your school. And then the other thing too, if you'd like to hear more, either from Sally or from other presentations, we do have another event. St. Francis de Sales is putting it on a webinar tomorrow, both at 9 a.m. and 7:30 p.m. So I would like to open it up to everyone, because I think we're bringing in some really great speakers. There's Josh Adams from Parent ProTech, who's going to be speaking on child safety and the internet. Sally's going to be talking more about neuroscience and mental health. We'll have Amy Lerman from the Parish School talking in the morning session, talking about how technology affects language development and things like that. So if you haven't already, check our event page if you'd like to check that out and join us for that. You're more than welcome to. All right, go ahead and take it away, Sally.
Yeah, so just very quickly, just to conclude, you know, peer pressure is, you know, like I said at the beginning, like a very kind of hot topic. Not only do the children feel peer pressure, but we also know that you as parents can feel an incredible amount of peer pressure, especially if you've got your child coming home saying they need this thing that everybody else has got, and you see all the parents who are letting their children have that. Maybe it's, you know, maybe your child's friends have social media and you feel like you're the only one that isn't letting your child have the peer pressure. It's strong across lots of different, you know, demographic. So we just want to be here to support you at your school. Like I say, we're rapidly expanding. We would love to be able to offer a lot of the school-based programs that we do, across multiple different school regions. Keep looking. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to our website. We're going to have webinars that run each month. Next month, we're going to be focusing a little bit more on. So what I would always hear in lots of conversations with parents is when we ask them to delay smartphones and, we said, we want to just delay this tech, we need to just step away from tech, then they would say, well, and now what? Like, what do we do instead? And so the next webinar is going to really feature, what children need from actually being out in nature, the science of why children, need that experience within the natural world and not just on a digital world. We're hopefully going to have a guest there. Again, look out for the newsletter next month. It's going to have a lot of information about values, so that if you can't attend our events, you can definitely do that and share feedback with us. If you do this, if you do that workshop, or if you do that value sheet, or if you even just have a conversation tonight with your child about, like, hey, we're going to set up a conversation about what are our values, like what is important to us as a family, like what are those things that anchor us in our decision making, share with us, email us, just tell us, like, we want to champion all of your successes too. So thank you all for joining. Apologies again for the kind of blip at the beginning. We'll be on again this evening. So if you've heard this and you feel like, oh gosh, I want more people to hear this, please share the link. We'd love as many people as on this evening. It's going to be the same, exactly the same format. Melanie will be back on. So please share. Yeah. And thank you all so much. Happy Monday, everybody. Have a great week.